is a mid-season for Vinny the Wonderful to run the mission with your host, Vinny the Wonderful.
Ta-da! Yes, number 12, and it's mid-season time. Season 1, 24 episodes, but I'm gonna keep on going. And who's gonna stop me? Ain't nobody's gonna stop me. And I'm gonna keep on going. So, spoiler alert. Seriously, today I'm going to talk about spoilers. Now, the reason that I'm talking about spoilers is that it's something that I take kind of very seriously, because when I was very young, an uncle of mine just straight up told me that at the end of a certain Bruce Willis movie, Redacted All Along, and you can tell that I'm not even telling which movie it is and what the spoiler was, but if you've seen the movie, you'd know. And I'm very big on that. I hear a lot of podcasts and people will give like the key reveal scene of an old movie that I haven't seen, and they'll say stuff like, well, you know, it's an old movie, so you can't spoil. Yeah, you absolutely can spoil an old movie. Like, what is people's mentality? Like, if I'm talking to someone, say they're 18 or 20, and I tell the end of a real good Fritz Lang movie that was produced in the 40s, it's not because the movie is old that people are supposed to have seen all the accumulated knowledge and artwork that has ever been produced. There are so many great books, comic books, movies, etc., that rely on a certain revelation for it to be entertaining, for it to be cool. And even if it is old, even if it is on a different language, like if you tell the person the ending or the revelation of the movie, it kind of spoils it. So I'm very conscious of it. In this transmission, I'm going to try my very best to not spoil things. Again, I'm specifically saying stuff that actually does spoil. Like, it ruins the experience. It's like if there is a mystery story and you tell the person who is the killer, like, that spoils. Like, part of the fun is knowing. Is actually part of the fun is not knowing and then learning through the story. So I'm very conscious of it, but I guess not everybody is. And another thing that got me real frustrated is that as I'm going and watching those old black and white movies, those old classic movies that, you know, that made a difference and they were very impactful, I'm realizing just how many of them were spoiled, not necessarily by a person going and telling me the end, but by comedy. So when I was young, me and my brother, we were very much into The Simpsons, and now I realize like how I still think The Simpsons, like the early stuff, is very funny, but comedy, they really they just take a scene from a good movie and remake it with their characters. So I'm watching Doctor Strangelove, and I know the freaking end of it because I've seen like it parodied in some cartoon or several movies that I've seen that I'm like, oh yeah, The Simpsons ruined this episode of this old series or this movie, and then it got me thinking of actually how funny is that anyway. Like in the early 2000s, and unfortunately even very recently, there are so many movies that rips off that one scene in The Matrix. Now, this is not a spoiler. This is just like a cool scene that happens in the movie The Matrix, where the character jumps in the air to give a kick, and then everything stops, the camera moves around, and the character does a flying crane kick in the air. Right? So it's an iconic thing from The Matrix that was really hard for the filmmakers to do at the time with their technology. And every goddamn comedy movie after that redid that scene. And it's like, I don't want to sound like, no, I'm a comedy critic or anything like that, but is that a joke? Is that a joke? Just, hey, it's that one scene from Matrix, but with our funny character or cartoon or whatever. Like, it's so lazy. It's barely a joke. And they really do that like all the time with a lot of stuff that you'd be watching with the family on Nickelodeon, and they're remaking like Silence of the Lambs or Scorsese, like on a kids show, and it's like, but the kids they don't know the Goodfellas, they don't know like those movies. Like what is the point here? It's just like for the amusement of the creators. Sometimes, obviously, sometimes that stuff can be funny. Sometimes it can work as an homage or a tribute or no, it's not just plagiarism or copying for the sake of copying for the novelty or gag. It actually does make sense. But I became kind of frustrated of how those cartoons, comedy shows, they spoiled stuff for no reason. For real, like no reason. Like the stuff isn't particularly fun. Again, maybe that's just my taste. Like I don't think you spoiling the big revelation of an old show just so that people watching would be like, oh, it's like that thing from that other thing. Like, anyway, and that stuff is like everywhere. I've seen like a video of a guy talking about paintings, and there was a spoiler for Yojimbo in that. I hadn't seen Yojimbo at the time. I was like, oh, great. When I watched that, oh, they used the final scene of the thing very unnecessarily editing. They used like the ending of one of the greatest movies of all time just to illustrate a video that was talking about Hokusai. So like of all footage of old Japan that you could get, did it really needed to be like the ending scene of that movie? Anyway, so to bring it back to art, it's unrelated to spoilers, but it does relate to the idea of creativity and how people sometimes copy things for the sake of copying. I'm not talking about swiping. I'm talking about compositions and how I see sometimes that people use another artist's composition for no good reason. I'll give an example. I've seen so many ripoffs, or not quite a ripoff, but like a copy of the composition of the poster for Jaws, the Spielberg shark movie. And that poster has such an interesting composition. It has a giant shark on the bottom, and then mostly blue and a surface level of the water and a swimmer, and then just the title, Jaws. Such an elegant composition. And perhaps because of that, I've seen so many people just replace the shark with some other character, replace the swimmer with some other character, and call it a day. And it's like, I get that it is appealing. It's a very, very good composition. But you gotta do, at the end of the day, you gotta do more than just like get the same composition and change it. Some compositions are a bit more difficult to run away from, like your standard character standing in the middle of the thing. Like you can't be completely and utter creative every time. You should try, you should attempt to, but sometimes you can't. But in these like very specific iconic cases, if it makes sense, if it is like maybe a parody, or if it makes sense, it makes sense. But sometimes I've seen way too many that makes no sense. And Saturn devouring his own son from Goya is also another one that has like a lot of people copying it. And it's fine. Like, I'm not talking about the subject matter. Rubens also painted Saturn devouring his son. I'm talking about like just using that painting as a reference and slightly altering it. Again, use artist discretion is advised, right? That can work. That it really is, case by case. And I'm not declaring it as a bad thing to do. It's just that sometimes, especially with more popular compositions, it can get oversaturated, that it loses its specialness. So, like the spoilers for the movies, like those iconic scenes, they are iconic because they were special, and people who saw Psycho, Star Wars episode, episode 6, and like those special moments, they were special because they were unique. And they were awesome because they were unique. And so if we copy them and copy and copy and copy, you actually diminish the uniqueness of the original rather than capture that uniqueness to your own. So I suppose I'm pledging people to be more mindful of that and perhaps create something that every time like pull it back and try to be more original. That is what I attempt to do in my work, but who knows, maybe you think that I'm just as hacky as anyone else, and that is fine. Thank you everybody for listening in again. I announced my new project and I'll be posting more about it on my blogspot. It's vinnythewonderful.blogspot.com, and I see you next time.